Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike, as always, and we got a good one for you guys this episode. Happy New Year, happy 2024, and we got two stories we're going to look at today. We're looking at issue 11 of volume 2, which is going to be Daisho part 1, and also Mongrels as well. So let's get into this episode. But before we do that, thank you everybody who listens to the podcast, and make sure to go subscribe to whatever podcast platform you choose to. Share the podcast, leave a review or 5 stars if you like the podcast that much, or leave a comment. Like on Spotify, you can leave feedback or comments like that. Or if you want to leave feedbacks on like Apple Podcasts, that's cool too, or whatever platform you choose to do so on. I normally check Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but let's get into this issue. So Daisho part 1 starts out really interesting, actually. We get a history lesson. All about making swords and how there's two kinds of ore. You have mined ore and sand ore, and they tell you the differences about said ore and stuff like that. Like one is, obviously mined, and one is taken from the sand and stuff like that. It's a really, really long thing, but they talk about the different ways you can go about like heating up the ore. You can make a fire, and they like bury it under the ground and stuff, and they make like this opening under the ground to heat up the ore, the metal, and they end up actually going and blessing the preparation room for the smithing, weaponsmiths, whatever you want to call them, the blacksmiths, to prepare the metal to make the swords. It's really interesting to see like this process, and I was very taken back and surprised that we start with this. And it very much caught me off guard, but it was really interesting to see how they take the metal and they hammer it with their hammers, and there's like several people hammering the ore, the metal, and they take it and they test its strength, and they flip it over and they bend it, they hit it again, and they flip it and they hit it again, and they very much like take their time making these swords, or this particular set of swords, I guess you could say. And the forge has to just be right, and they go in, they put it in the forge, heat it up and whatnot, and then they take it out, and it has to be sharp and whatnot, and the edge has to be perfect. It must be hard. They say this is the most sacred part of the process, they say, and then there you show them like touching the blade, and they heat it back up, and then stuff like that, and then they go about cleaning the blade, and we see the blacksmith who actually made these swords. He's like, oh, he's looking at his sword, he's looking at the swords, and you see his I guess they're his students, or they're people who work for him. They're like, oh, sensei, a truly fine weapon. And he's the blacksmith's like, a weapon? No, this is a samurai soul. If you remember correctly, yeah, that's what Katsuichi called it before, which is a samurai soul. The next day, I guess the people who work for him, one of the people who work for him, they're like, sir, a samurai has come, and he wants to, he's from a personal retainer, and apparently from our lord, and he wishes to purchase the Daisho, which is matching swords. And the blacksmith is like, oh, yes, please, the swordsmith. I don't know what you call him. I guess you would call him blacksmith. I don't know what you would call him. I want to say blacksmith. He's like, oh, yes, please, show him in. Bring me more tea as well. And this big, burly, I think he's like an ox. He comes in, he's like, Sensei, I am a veteran of many battles. I have taken dozens of heads, but now I seek a new pair of blades. The sharpness of your swords is known throughout the land. Sell me your best pair, and I will swear to put them to good use. And we see the blacksmith. He's like he has a very like grimace like look on his face, and he's like, "You must misunderstand my skills. I may be a mere artisan, but I create souls for the samurai, not murder weapons. Go find go find you an iron monger and buy yourself a butcher knife," he says. And the samurai's like, "Oh no, what? No one speaks to me like that." And the blacksmith, he's like, I just did no sword for you," is what he says. "No sword for you." And he kind of looks at him. He gives him like this mean, stern look, and the guy just walks away. And one of the blacksmith's swordsmith, I want to say a swordsmith because he makes swords. Swordsmith. He comes in. He's like, "Oh, too bad you lost that sale." And the swordsmith is like, "Fool. I am not a merchant who counts his coins. These swords, they're the very spirit of a samurai class, and that one is, in spite of his position, is not worthy of my swords." And he tells his student to bring him some more tea, and he's like, "Oh yes, sir." And then we see. And a few days later, a couple more samurai of the same caliber come through. And they all get turned away as well. Until we see this one samurai come in. I guess he's a samurai. I'm not really sure. A man comes in with his son. And he says, "Thank you, sensei, for indulging us. My son is almost 15. It's almost time for manhood," he says. "He seeks a sword as he will soon receive his top knot." And the swordsmith says, "And what do you say, youngster?" And the youngster says, "Sensei, I am untrained, but I will strive to be worthy of these blades." And he looks at him with his stern look on his face, and he kind of gives him like a little smirk. Then we skip forward in time 300 years into the future, which leads us to the present, where, if you don't remember, Usagi is actually, he helped some slaves, these farmers who were enslaved by this General Fuji, and he helped them out, and he was taken prisoner or taken into slavery himself. Usagi was. His swords were taken, and General Fuji is on the run, and Usagi is after him. And that's where this particular part of the story actually starts back up. And we see Usagi. He is angry. He is very angry. And he's like, "Where are my swords?" And he's charging at these guys. And they're like, "Oh, look out. He's a madman. He's got those villagers to back him up," the brigands say. Usagi's like, "Where's the general?" As they're running towards these guys, just murdering them. They are taking them out. Usagi means business. Usagi wants his swords. We see Usagi running in the background. He's like, "Fuji." He's running, and Fuji sees him with his bodyguards. I'm like, "How could they find us so quickly? We barely escaped the village we enslaved. He must be possessed." And that's what one of Fuji's men say. And Fuji's like, "Quiet, fool." And they're like, "Hurry, general, we have to cross the bridge." And they go to cross the bridge. And there's this big, long bridge over this. They call it a gorge is what they call it. And they're like, one of the men say, "He's cutting through the men like rice paper. Nothing will stop him." And alone, he is formidable and allied with angry villagers. They kind of gasp, and they're like, "Why not just give him back his swords?" One of the men say, and Fuji's like, "No, I refuse to cower before me, or I refuse." No, he refused to cower before me, is what Fuji says. If I return his blades, it will mean he has beaten me. Which, I have to agree with Fuji's men. Why not just return the blades and get over your pride, and all this will be over with? But then I guess we wouldn't have a good story to talk about, I guess, Fuji ends up telling the men to cut the rope, destroy the bridge, but his men are like, but General, our men are on the other side, and I said, cut the rope. And Fuji gets really angry. He's like, cut it now. And we see the men, one of them, the man who is cutting the rope, he's like, forgive me, comrades. And we see this one guy running. He's like, no, General, no, don't leave me. And he was running, and the bridge is obviously cut. So he can't get across, and he kind of stops and stalls. And he looks back, and he takes a big gulp, and he sees Usagi behind him. He's like, I'm not dealing with this. And he just jumps off the cliff. And we see him fall down this very high up off this cliff, this gorge, I guess you could say. And Usagi continues to walk towards the bridge with the snarl on his face, and he just says, Fuji. Usagi yells at Fuji, telling him to lay down my sword on the ground, leave it there, and if you don't do that, I swear I'm going to hunt you down until it takes my entire life. I'm going to hunt you down, is what he says. And Fuji's like, you talk big, Usagi, but by the time, you cross this gorge, I'll be long gone. Goodbye, Usagi. Goodbye, Ronin. I'll be sure to put my new swords to good use. And he kind of laughs it off, and he walks away laughing. And some of the men are like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's go do this. And some of them are like, I don't know if we should actually do this. I think you should probably give him back his swords, is I think what the consensus is. Just give Usagi back his swords. Usagi ends up yelling to the heavens that he wants his sword. He's like, Usagi-san, Noboru says, if you remember, Noboru is the head man of the village and Usagi saved. And he's like, are you all right, Usagi-san? And Usagi says, how long does it take to get across Noboru? And Noboru's like, it takes a full day, Usagi. There's no bridges around, no real towns around, if I remember correctly. You can either walk around, it'll take you a day, or go down the gorge, climb down it, and then climb back up it. But Usagi's like, then I guess I better get started. And Noboru says, hey, let me accompany you. And Usagi's like, no, you have a village to rebuild, and the captured slavers will have to be turned over to the authorities. You need every hand you got. And Noboru's like, but I can be of help. And Usagi's like, besides, in my mood, I would not be the most desirable traveling companion. Yes, Usagi is definitely right on this one, because Usagi is definitely in a bad mood, to say the least. That's the nicest way to put it. Usagi leaves Noboru and the villagers and tells them, I'm going to go find Fuji on my own. They say goodbye, and the villagers end up wishing Usagi good luck. 2 weeks later, we see Usagi walking down the road in the woods, and Usagi he's just walking down the road tracking Fuji, and we see this guy come out, and he's like, "Oh yeah, hold it, don't draw your weapon, give me all your money." This guy, he's like very threatening, and he just stops dead in his tracks. And I think this is the guy who cut the rope. At first, I thought it was the guy who fell off into the gorge, but after reading it again, I think it's the guy who cut the rope on the bridge, which is kind of funny, because he runs away, and he's like, ah, and we see this guy, and he's like, I gotta get away, gotta get away, gotta get away. Gotta get away, he says, gotta get away. Oh, he starts huffing and puffing. He's like, oh, no one can find me now, And we hear, where's the general? So this man travels all this way to hide from Usagi, get away from Usagi. And Usagi's on his tail. This man, he's trembling over. He's like has his back up against a log. He's like, no, it can't be. I give up. Please don't kill me. He's like, Usagi says, where is he? And the man's like, no, stay back. No, please don't hurt me. Where's the general? I want the general. Usagi says, no, I left him, abandoned him at the gorge. And he's the devil, Ronin, a devil. And this man falls back and hits his head. This man is obviously scared for his life because he knows what they did was wrong. And Usagi is the Reaper, and he's going to take what is his. And this man says, he forced us to do all this stuff. I didn't want to enslave the villagers. It was the general. He ordered us to do so. Like I said, he's the devil. He stole your sword, samurai. Please, let me go. I promise I'll never prey on others again. I'll go straight. I swear I'll go straight. And all Usagi wants to know is, where's Fuji? And the man says, to the west. He's to the west. He went to the west. There's a small gang there. He went there. He plans to take over that gang. And the man is cowering in fear. He's like, please don't kill me. Please, please, please. And he's sobbing. And all we see is Usagi walking off in the background. He did not touch this man whatsoever. And we continue with Usagi traveling to the village to the west. Usagi ends up getting to this village. I don't know why I called it a station. This village. And he's like, oh, it's odd. Nobody's actually here. This is definitely like a ghost town. Like, where is everybody? Did everybody get run off? Or did everybody just hiding from General Fuji? He's like, hello, this is strange. Like, the villagers aren't here. And Usagi ends up walking into a building. And this woman comes after him and attacks him. She's like, murderer. And Usagi basically, like, judo flips him, like, throws this woman. And this woman's like, go ahead, kill me. You're no better than your General Fuji. And Usagi's like, what are you talking about? I'm actually tracking General Fuji and his whereabouts. And apparently, General Fuji has actually been terrorizing this village for the past 2 weeks, apparently, according to this woman. Apparently, they came through this town this morning, and they just took what they wanted and left. Our village elder tried to stop them, but alas, he was slashed and cut up with the sword, attacked with the sword. And Usagi has his face in his hand. He's like, oh, my swords. He thinks to himself, oh, my swords were used for such evil. Usagi goes away from the woman, gets ready to leave, and he's like, I gotta go stop him. I gotta go stop General Fuji. And the woman's like, wait, samurai, please save our elder, please. I have no time, Usagi says. I have to go stop the general. And this woman collapses to the ground, sobbing, saying, you're no better. Usagi walks off, looks back, and he sees the woman crying on the ground. Later on, we transition from that to now Usagi actually helps the man, and he helps him as best he can, because Usagi is not a doctor. He knows a little bit, but he doesn't know everything there is. He tells them to go actually send for a doctor to make sure, he survives in the meantime. And he goes to leave, and everybody is thanking him, bowing their heads, saying, thank you, samurai, thank you, thank you. And we hear, samurai, wait. Usagi turns to look, and the woman, it says, forgive us. When you came into our village, we were afraid of you because of what he did. But we know we were wrong. You helped us, and I will help you. Because of what you did, Usagi, I'm going to help you. The woman tells Usagi that Fuji's hideout is to the western mountains. I don't know where, she says, I don't know why you are searching for the general, but I will lead you to him. And Usagi and this mystery woman, who she doesn't get a name at this point, go off to go off in search of General Fuji. And that's where this particular story ends of Daisho Part 1. I just gotta say, this one, it blew me out of the water, I have to say, in the fact that originally when I was reading this for the podcast, because I'm reading this as I go along, when I originally read Slavers, I thought that was going to be the end of it. And I didn't realize that the story was going to keep moving forward, which I really do like. Like, I like that we get another, I don't know, I guess another person in Usagi's rogues gallery, but I don't think General Fuji's going to last that long in Usagi's rogues gallery. But, I like that the story is continuing and we're getting different wrinkles within this particular story regarding Usagi and how his behavior has changed from the beginning of the story in Slavers Part 1 to now. Usagi is like a man on a mission. He is very much a madman in this sense. Like, he wants what is his and he doesn't care what he has to do to really get it, even though like he very much has like a beeline. Like, he's very one-sided in his goal. He even is going to pass up helping others, which that is Usagi in his character. Like, that's hard coded into Usagi's characters to help others. He was willing to forgo his morals and helping other people in search of his sword, which is, the one thing that Usagi has that really means something to him. It was really interesting to see. And I also liked, which I took it this way, I don't know if it was meant to be taken this way, I took the beginning of the story where the swordsmith was making the swords. I took it as those were Usagi's swords, like 300 years ago. And then they eventually got to Usagi, through the tournament that they held at the very, very beginning of this series. That was really interesting to see, but I took it that way. Let me know if I am just reading into it wrong or not. But I took it as like those were Usagi's swords being made, and like the process of making them and why those swords were so special to Usagi. In a sense, like maybe Usagi heard about that story when he was a child from Katsuichi or something like that. Who knows? No, not as a child, or as like a young adult, I guess you could say, when he like won the tournament. 'Cause I remember there was some kind of backstory for those swords. I just can't remember them off the top of my head. But they were a particular type of sword. And they had like a nickname for the sword. Like the swords had their own name, if I remember correctly, which I don't remember what they were called. It's cool if that the story of the swords end up tying back into this, like when he got to them. So it's like a full circle process of like Usagi getting the swords. We find out a little bit about them, and He ends up going to go get his swords back. I really liked the start of the middle part of this story, I guess you could say. Because it's not the start of a story, it's the middle part of the story. It's the Empire Strikes Back of the search for Usagi's swords. It's that good, But anyways, we are moving on to the short story within issue 11, which is Mongrels. So when we get into Mongrels, we get Genosuke, or Gen, Usagi's best friend, the Rhino Bounty Hunter, which is odd that we get Gen at the beginning of the story. So when I was doing a little bit of research, people said that this was the first story to not star Usagi in any real way. I mean, he shows up at the very end of this little story, but this is the first story to not star Usagi as the main character, which I found really interesting to see. But we do get Gin, one of my personal favorite characters, and we get a new character. And when we get to him, we'll get to him. So Gin is walking through this village. He goes to the innkeeper's place, and he's like, "Innkeeper, some food and drinks. I've been on the road since this morning." And he's like, "Oh yes, sir. I got you. And Gin holds up a picture. And he's like, "I'm looking for this guy." And the innkeeper's like, "So you're a bounty hunter, huh? I should have known. Put a price on someone's head, and all the maggots crawl out, huh? Crawl out of the rotten wood." And Gin kind of looks at him. He's like, "Yeah, what do you mean by that?" And we hear a voice off in the distance. And he's like, "He's referring to me, Genosuke." And Gin turns and he's like, "I know you are. You're a bounty hunter. They call you Stray Dog." And this is the new character that we get to meet, which is Stray Dog. And he's a dog samurai. He's actually a dog bounty hunter, I guess you could say. And Stray Dog says, "Yeah, but in our profession, we're all mongrel dogs. We've never crossed paths, but I know you through your reputation." And Stray Dog tells Gin to sit. I find it really interesting that the world is big enough, I guess, and the world is big enough for bounty hunters to actually know each other, which I find that really interesting to see that, Gin is somewhat prominent enough to be recognized within the bounty hunting community. Gin, you could say, is very much, we're not going to call him the Boba Fett because nobody likes Boba Fett. Gin is more like the Mandalorian of Usagi Yojimbo bounty hunters, I guess you could say. Stray Dog tells Gin, "You got an assassin gone 2 months ago in a northern province. I got there a week later, apparently, or a week late," he says. And Gin says, "Yeah, that was real profitable. But it's amazing how money slips through my fingers like water. I guess it's the same with you. You got the brigands Kuichi last month, and now you're here. I wonder why." And Stray Dog says, "Oh, it's obvious, we're here. We're obviously both here for the same bounty. Here, I'll treat you to a bottle before you leave." And Stray Dog hands Gin a bottle of sake, and Gin says thank you, and he swigs it back and drinks, and Stray Dog kind of like is hunched over the table with his arms crossed, and he says, "Okay, if you had your drink, now clean out, or clear out," he says. "I don't want any competition on this job." And Gin's like, that settled the dust in my throat. Thanks a lot, And Stray Dog kind of like grimaces at him, like he's like snarls at him. And Gin's like, "Oh, I see. I'll see you around sometime." And they kind of both part ways. And like, "Bye, see ya." And Stray Dog thinks to himself, he's like, "Oh, you fool." Later on, somebody comes in, and they're like, Stray Dog, I found him." And Stray Dog says, "Good, where is he?" "I'll tell you, but first, you promised him my reward." And he's like, "Oh, of course, here's your money. You informants are greedier than ever I am. Even I am," he says. Like, "now, where is he?" And we see this person. I think they're a guy. I don't know. They could be a woman. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but they're a person. They tell Stray Dog, and when they're telling Stray Dog this, Gin actually hears what they're talking about. And he says, the person says, "He's in the mountains to the north. I can't tell you exactly how to get there." And Gin is outside. He's like stroking, listening through the paper door. He's like, huh, you fool. And we see Stray Dog ends up going off to the mountains. Or he's on his, I guess I could say he's on his way to the mountains. And he kind of gets the sense that, I think somebody is following me. Somebody is behind me. He'll be coming along this road any day now, And as he goes behind a tree and he's hiding from this suspected person who's following Stray Dog, and we see Gin sitting there, and he says, hello again, and he kind of spooks Stray Dog, and he's like, Gin, you were the one following me. I told you to clear out. And I like this part, Gin, because it's very much on point for Gin. He says, I was never one for taking good advice. And Stray Dog's like, the outlaw's head is mine. I don't want you bumbling around here. I'll settle this once and for all. And he's like, Gin says, if you insist. And they draw their swords. And we see them both whispering. We know they're whispering because they have dotted lines around their speech bubbles, which that's a little touch that I really, really do enjoy. They're like, I hear someone is coming. Someone who used stealth before. They have their stealth skills up really high, apparently. They put all their skill points in the stealth. Gin and Stray Dog are going towards this sound. And Gin's like, they use stealth, as Stray Dog says. And Gin says, that usually means no good. And Gin's like, truce? ? And Stray Dog's like, sure, at least until this whole thing is over. And Stray Dog and Gin jump out of these bushes. And they're like, and this really cool scene. And Gin stops Stray Dog in his tracks. He's like, Stray Dog says, hold it, you. And Gin's like, stop. I know him. And it's Usagi of all people. Who would have thought that this little story ties in to the overarching story that we are talking about? Such a fun little read. Such a fun introduction to a new character. One, Genosuke is always a fun character to bring back into the stories. He's Usagi's best friend, so he has to come back, right? Or he's Usagi's self-proclaimed best friend, I guess you could say. But getting a rival for Gin is something that is a lot of fun. I love this new character of Stray Dog. He very much seems like the complete polar opposite of Gin. Like, Gin's very brash and rough around the edges. And Stray Dog, from what I could gather in this particular just first impression, Stray Dog is not that whatsoever. He is more polished, more refined, I guess you could say. The opposite of Gin. The polar opposite, I guess you could say. Like, they're two sides of the same coin, it seems like. And I really like that. I like this new character, and I like how they introduce him right smack dab in the middle of the story. And I want to know more about Stray Dog. And I hope Stray Dog ends up staying around in this world more so we get to see him more. But it was cool. It was cool to see him and Gin interact. Because whenever Gin shows up, you know the story is you're gonna have a good time reading it. Because Gin is such a beloved character. I would love to get more stories where it was just Gin and his journeys through the world. Maybe one day we'll get those. Who knows? Because I know that they've talked about exploring those options in other stories I've heard recently. But yeah, this is all in all a fun story. A good setup. Well, more setup to the story. Like, Stan Sakai added another wrinkle within the story, and that is we're adding Gin back into the story, and we're adding this new character who is very much he's very much a wild card in this situation. Like, how is he going to react to everything? Which I'm thrilled. I'm enthralled to see. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what goes from here. And I want to say thank you guys for listening to the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. It means a lot. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular episode. Go check out the Facebook page, Usagi Podjimbo, an Usagi Yojimbo podcast. You can catch me there. But yeah, thanks for listening. Share the podcast, tell your friends, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace out, stay safe, and go read some Usagi Yojimbo.